Ahora sí.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mrs. Seguri. We are group number 2, and we are going to talk about the Romanticism period. Jose Antonio is going to start.
Okay, hi, Miss. I'm going to talk about the origin of Romanticism. And as is well known, Romanticism was an artistic, a literary, and an intellectual movement that had origin in Europe between the 80s and the 1840. So, better well say, the 8th century. Uh, the 80s and the 1840 was like the top age of the Romanticism because was the best age that Romanticism had. There was some important things happening too, like for example the influence of the French Revolution, um, though influenced by other artistic and intellectual movements. The ideologies and the events of the French Revolution created the primary context from which both Romanticism and the counter-Englishmen emerged. Um, the Romanticism, or better well said, the artists of Romanticism had some core values. For example, the French painter Paul Gauguin said this phrase. This phrase says, "Civilization is what has made us sick." What he meant with this phrase, he meant that all the modernism and all the revolution that was happening because of the factories, because of the politics trying to rebuild the cities and all this, was separating us from others because the things that unite us are the feelings, the emotions, the poems, the art, and all the romantic things we share with others. Some pioneers of Romanticism, for example, was Thomas Chatterton. Thomas Chatterton was a kind of emblem and a kind of hero that inspired other artists to begin to write or to make works of Romanticism. Thomas Chatterton was a young man that took off his life because no one understood him. No one understood his works, and no one bought his works because his works was works that talk about nature, honesty, and things like this. Artists that were inspired from his works was Vincent van Gogh, Lord Byron, William Blake, and Edgar Allan Poe. Personally, I like the works of Edgar Allan Poe because his works has a kind of dark and a kind of sense that made them very unique. And I remember that in the previous literature too, we read some books of him. One of them was, if I'm not wrong, was a book that talked about people in a train fighting for resources. And this book is referred to politics and how they used to prefer their benefits instead of the benefits of the people. And some characteristics of Romanticism in England are the glorification of nature, emphasis on aesthetic beauty, focus on exotism and history, vivid sensory descriptions, use of personification, and focus on the self and autobiography. The majority of these works used to be a kind of criticism of the things that were happening. The artists used to contrast how nature fight against, for example, factories or against the revolution that was happening. And emphasis on aesthetic beauty because this age was when the superficial things began to happen and all things like that. So now my partner is going to continue.
Thank you, and hi everybody, and Miss. I'm going to talk about rebirth of Romanticism. And as we know, England assimilated philosophical ideas of Kant and Hegel and the revolutionary ideas of the French philosophers, which create a literally movement of Romanticism. The revolution in 1789 had violently shaken English to arouse liberal ideas. And Newton's science and Locke's philosophy were important contributions to the 18th century. Romanticism is the broad sense meant individualism and revival of the imaginative faculty of the matter of literally compositions. Romanticism is described as a return to nature and the renaissance of wonder. It is the introduction of the imagination and sense of mystery in literature. The lyrical ballads published by Wordsworth and Coleridge in 1798 inaugurate the Romantic era. It is called the period of Romantic revival because the glorious productions in the 19th century had a close kinship with those of the spacious age of Elizabeth. What happened at that time is that the George III, that was first the king, ruled England from 1760 to 1820s. Sorry, the thing with him, it was that he has mental illness. So since 1811, George IV ruled England because of his father mental illness. What happened with his father was that he was not taking care of the people, and he was not taking care of the American Revolution. He put everything away, and he was like, it doesn't matter about everything that was happening at that time. So even though George IV was crowned king at the age of 57 years old, living his life quite extravagantly. He liked a lot of the wine, a lot of the women, and a lot of food. And even he was calm as Coulter earned with his title of the first gentleman of the England. His dissolute way of life earned him the complete of the people and denied the prestige of the monarchy. So it was like very disappointing the way that he was ruling England, and the people was totally disagree with his ideas. And so we are going to continue with my classmate Daysi Escobar.
Hello, I am Daysi Escobar, and I'm going to talk about the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution began in the 18th century. The Romanticism was the initial literary and artistic reaction to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution had the most significant effect on the Romantic poetry. The Industrial Revolution directly correlated with the horrible living conditions and the wages for lower than that was required to have a decent living. Also, the extortion of children and for labor that followed the industrialization and the urbanization of Great Britain. Industrialism led to the destruction of rural areas as factories expanded. There was a mild destruction of nature, abuse of children, urbanization, and the destruction of nature led to many poets like John Keats, William Blake, William Wordsworth, and Percy Shelley to make criticism about the Industrial Revolution, because the Industrial Revolution changed the world, modernized and transformed the world. During the Industrial Revolution, child labor was common, as I mentioned before. Labor laws allowed their employers to pay them wages much lower than that was for adults, and oftentimes children began working at the age of 4, and they would work for long hours and sometimes die from exhaustion, and many times orphans and abandoned children would be sold for workhouses. And Blake criticizes this part of society in one of his poems that is called The Chimney Sweeper. The Chimney Sweeper is focused on the abuse of children had to suffer as chimney sweeper, because this job was only for child, because only then were able to fit down perfectly in the chimney. Another important fact about the Industrial Revolution is that James Watt invented the steam engine in 1769, and also the romantic novel of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein reflected the industrial effects in Europe, because the Industrial Revolution was filled of large factories with extremely wealthy owners, while the working class had to live in squalid poverty. So in this time, were advantage and disadvantage at the same time, because the working class had to move to the city to get jobs in factories. Can you put the next slide, please? Well, another important fact are the characteristics from classic to romantic, and one of them is the awareness and acceptance of emotion. This is focus on emotion is a key characteristic of nearly all writing from the Romantic period. When you see, when you read words of this period, you will see feeling described in all forms. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein offer a perfect example of this characteristic of Romanticism, because a Frankenstein shows a great self-awareness of his feelings and a vivid emotional description of full of anger and sadness. We have also a celebration of artistic creativity and imagination. In contrast to the previous generation of reason, writer of the Romanticism movement explore the importance of imagination in creative impulse, and you can see this in William Wordsworth's poem, The Prelude. We have another characteristic that is themes of solitude. The writer of this period is celebrated the feeling of being alone, because they believe that creative inspiration came from solitary exploration. And you can see this in the work of Samuel Tyler with the poem Frost at Midnight. And we have the last, that is spiritual and supernatural elements. The writer of this period explored the contrast between life and death, and you can see an example of this characteristic in the Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. Well, that's basically the characteristic from classic to romantic. So Marta is going to continue with the graveyard school.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk about the graveyard school. So, graveyard school describe 15 British poets. These poets were to the cemetery and to write about death and darkness. And they were write about the present moment in their lives. So, these poets were focused on writing about things that happen in the real life because was important for them to feel the the emotion about this kind of poem, and perhaps they have been through in their life writing about related to the cemetery was mark their life because some of these poets um, were lose some familiar. And in this graveyard, we have some of the most famous poets that are Robert Blair, Edward Young, Thomas Parnell, and Thomas Gray. And Edward Young is considered one of the first graveyard poets. His most famous poems is called The Complaint. The Complaint, Death, Immortality. He is inspired to write this poem because his wife is dead, and he decided to write this poem about the death of his wife. So another poet is Robert Blair, is famous for his poem The Grave and described the horror that comes with death. So all of these poets write about death, darkness. So it is also like the horror that he feels in this kind of poems. And Thomas Paine is considered a genius. Paine became depressed after his wife is died. And his most famous poem is A Night Peace and Death. And as I told you before, all of these poets write about death. I don't know what is the idea that he need to do to know pues about this poem. And the graveyard is made of revolutionary poem that started a literary movement. The graveyard poem can be comfort to people who are also looking at death and with their negative experiences. So these poems are related to with the feelings that they feel when they lose some people. And now I'm going to talk about some difference between the first and the second generation. And I have some difference between the first generation. I have linked to the English reality and simple and spontaneous, concerned with simplicity and humble and nature seen as restoring feeling. And with as you can see in this in the first generation, they they demonstrate their feelings in a way that is that are real, that things that happen in the moment. And in the second generation, I have they all the fascination of Mediterranean countries, elaborate in deep language, and concerned with classical work. And in the second generation, I can see that poets write about are more classical. They inspire about the love that he feels, and also that inspire in the nature. So right on in the first generation thought that society can be considered as an evil force the first year in their life. Most of the time, they believe that the man represents the power of the life. So this is all about our presentation, and thank you for your attention.